A year after the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, is the airline industry keeping up with modern tracking technology? And where does the buck stop when it comes to taking responsibility when things go wrong? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Darine Abougaida. Well, it remains one of aviation's greatest mysteries, the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. It vanished on March the 8th last year, and still there are very few clues about where it may have ended up. The Boeing 777 with 239 people on board dropped off civilian radar shortly after taking off from Kuala Lumpur. It was then tracked by military radar. After all contact was lost, though, quite where it ended up falls more into the realms of speculation. At one stage, the search area spanned almost 8 million square kilometers. That's about the size of Australia. And looking for that one single plane. Did the tragedy have to be such a mystery? And who takes charge in such events? Aljazeera's Sahil Rahman has been talking to Malaysia's transport minister as a vigil was being held in Kuala Lumpur to mark the first anniversary of the disappearance of Flight MH370.
It's the only way to remember those still missing. Many have gathered in public areas like this to pray, sing, and show their support for family and friends of those lost on MH370. The Prime Minister suggested at one stage during the last 12 months in an open press conference that the plane had been taken over. Yet, at the beginning of this year, we see a statement from the Department of Civil Aviation saying that it was an accident, yet we have no evidence of where the plane is, the black box recorders, or any wreckage. So how can such statements be made?
I think it's important we must understand the ICAO definitions of the announcement of declarations of accident. And that is important because under ICAO requirement, if a plane take off from an airport and couldn't reach a destination, after the search and rescue period, we have to announce the plane lost.
Such words do not sit well with those who had loved ones on MH370. Sarah Batch is still waiting to hear from her partner Philip Wood, a passenger on that flight bound for China.
As far as we can see from what has happened throughout the situation, there is abject corruption and incompetence at the highest levels. And I'm very clear to separate that from the average Malaysian or the average Malaysian Airlines employee. I think that they are victims in this and have done their best.
She's not the only one looking for answers. This Malaysia Airlines pilot, whose identity we hid for security reasons, reflected the feelings of many working in the aviation industry.
We are asking what happened, what actually happened, why it happened, and why Malaysia Airlines. That is the question that everybody is asking. Why us?
All that people here can do is show their support. Both young and old light candles, say prayers and sing. Sahil Rahman, Al Jazeera, Kuala Lumpur.
Let's bring in our guests. We have from Jakarta, Jerry Sojatman. He's an aviation industry consultant and co-founder of Communicavia, which specializes in aviation communications technology. Over in Manchester is Chris Yates. He's an independent aviation analyst and former aviation security editor at IHS Janes. And in Washington, D.C., Oliver McGee. He's an aviation specialist as well and former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Transportation. Welcome to you all to Inside Story. Chris, 1 year on, are you surprised that there's absolutely no trace of Flight MH370?
Surprised perhaps, but one has to put it into the context that this is an aircraft that has disappeared literally into a large swathe of ocean, and we know about where it is, but we don't know precisely where it is. And therefore we have to keep looking and keep assessing with all of the relevant data to determine precisely the location of the wreckage of the aircraft.
Let me just get your initial thoughts and idea about how the search rescue effort has gone so far, because Malaysia's transport minister, which we saw in Suhail Rahman's report there, he's also come out and said that the government remains committed to solving the mystery, and I'm quoting him here, and he says it remained unclear what the next steps would be. If the search now underway comes up empty, it would be back to the drawing board. What do you make of those comments?
Well, it will be back to the drawing board in part, but there has been a certain amount of work done by various different people over this past year to help to refine the search area somewhat, and perhaps also to better determine the location of the wreckage. That is still a long way off before we search some of that additional area that seems to be suggested by the additional research, but it will come eventually, and perhaps that will bring about a broadening of the search area.
Oliver, the Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott acknowledged very recently that officials are beginning to question the value of continuing beyond this point, and here's what he said. He said, "I can't promise that the search will go on at this intensity forever, but we will continue our very best efforts to resolve this mystery and provide some answers." Talk to us about this idea of responsibility, who it lies with.
Clearly, under the United Nations International Civil Aviation Organization, particularly in Annex 12 and 13, the responsibility lies in the sovereign state of Australia, where the plane is known to be lost as of March 24th by the Prime Minister of Malaysia. And most of the data coming from the Inmarsat satellites are suggesting that the last known position of the aircraft in the search priority area is off the coast of Australia. This is going to be a joint effort between Australia and Malaysia. They're each spending so far about $60 million. So that money is still continuing, but the search is going to continue till about May of this year. And then the two countries are going to go back and rethink what other further investments are necessary, and more importantly, begin to look at the priority search area, which is about right now about 40% to 2/3 complete. But they're going to continue on to May, and then they're going to decide where they need to go from there. And what I'm hearing from the Australian officials is they're going to expand the search area. But,
and that deadline of May is what the Malaysian transport minister was in fact referring to when he was saying that they will go back to the drawing board. It is a deadline of May. But he's also said, Oliver, that there is still much room to improve the safety and security of the global aviation industry. Do you think that enough has been done in that regard?
Well, fortunately, the International Civil Aviation Organization and ATA, the International Air Transport Association, have met in Montreal, Canada, early February 2 to 5 of 2015 to discuss global tracking and making recommendations for that. They have a draft plan already, and they're going to be trying to put up a full plan for global tracking of all aircraft internationally by 2016 of February.
So what you're saying is they are responsible, IATA as well as ICAO and other organizations, civil aviation organizations, are responsible for taking the lead when it comes to safety and security?
Absolutely, because it's an international forum, and they have the advice and counsel for the over 280 aircraft airliners around the world, and they have all the chiefs to be able to discuss that.
Chris, I see you nodding to what our guest out of Washington is saying, but let me ask you, should it not be the responsible as well of the airlines themselves?
Well, I suppose it should be the responsibility of the airlines themselves, but quite frankly, it always takes a top body, a lead body, to effect change when change is required, and ICAO is the right body to bring about that change, to mandate a requirement that all airlines irrespective of the country that they operate in, follow a clear set of rules so far as the tracking of their aircraft is concerned.
Jerry, what do you think needs to be done that has not been done when you look at safety and security?
Well, first of all, they need to agree on what to do with the tracking. I mean, we have, outside ICAO, we have debates going on with regards to how we're going to do the tracking. On one side, ironically, outside the airlines, we're talking about the general aviation community with the business jets, business aviation, private aircraft. They already have a tracking system that is much cheaper than what is there on the on the large airliners. And if we look at the setup, the physical setup of what's there in the larger airliners, there are some security risks physically. In terms of, we have some aircraft where, you use the satellite antenna, the satellite communications, not only for operational purposes, but also for passenger use. Sadly, on some of those aircraft, we have the control racks actually on the, on the overhead compartments of the cabin. We look at all this, all the various theories with MH370. I mean, if there are, those who say that, oh, this was taken over and all that, we in the industry should have a look at how can we prevent the tracking from being manipulated or manhandled or switched off. Because the whole point of the mystery of MH370 is what happens when you switch everything off? Now, is there a way to not switch things off? Now, if we look at the satellite systems of the large aircraft, they use the alternating current system, which is the high-powered system. And they will need to have circuit breakers and be controlled from the cockpit or the avionics bay, and you can switch them off. But if you look at the systems that are used in business aviation, they are very low-powered. I mean, I've been in an aircraft where they don't have any circuit breakers for those systems. And this, if we're talking about not safety, but security-wise, that is more secure, in my opinion.
Well, let's just take a look at exactly how a plane is tracked. Now, on the whole, air traffic controllers keep an eye on aircraft using radar technology. It dates back to the 1940s. So primary radar is the most basic type. It's reliable, but it's limited. And once a plane is some 240 kilometers out to sea, radar coverage then fades. And secondary radar is a bit more advanced. It uses transponders on the plane to transmit data like speed and direction back to air traffic controllers. Well, pilots can also keep in touch using high-frequency radios that can transmit and receive voice and data transmissions. And these, of course, can be turned off, and radar, as we were saying, can be lost. So the question is, why don't planes use GPS, global positioning system technology, something which is on most mobile phones? Well, planes do use GPS to show their position on a map, but that data is not usually shared with air traffic control, largely because it would be too expensive and it's hard to justify. And then there are the so-called black box flight recorders, a cockpit voice recorder and a flight data recorder used in air crash investigations. But could this be streamed to satellites in real time, providing immediate and potentially crucial information? Which I'll ask Chris in just a moment. But first, Oliver, let me ask you this, because Australia, Indonesia and Malaysia announced earlier this week that they were going to be trying out what they're calling this new method of tracking long-haul flights in the wake of the disappearance. And this trial, in fact, enables planes to be tracked every 15 minutes. And right now, planes are tracked around every 30 to 40 minutes, from what we understand. But this technology is actually installed right now on most long-haul flights. So do you think this step would have helped us learn if it was implemented beforehand? Would it have helped us learn what happened to MH370?
Absolutely. One of the key things that we're looking at here is systems engineering. And when you do that, you have to start with good data going into information, and then you get to knowledge and understanding. And what we're seeing in that first step, it's probably good for ATA and ICAO to actually look at putting good recommendations for increased global tracking. But I also want to suggest that it's probably good to combine technologies. It's time to put the black box in the cloud. I've seen the discussions coming out of ICAO for ejectable black boxes. when we start putting planes over oceanic regions and remote areas of the world, we're in new territory here. Since 1948, we've lost 80 aircraft, and we've only really found in deep oceans 3 aircraft: Eastern Airlines, a flight, your Grand Air Force flight, and Air France 447. So we're now in the search of the 4th aircraft of those 80, and that's the MH370. This is a search where no man has gone before, barring from Star Trek. So what we're looking in deep oceanic waters is brand new territory. All kinds of combined technology that we can bring together here will be very, very helpful. Black box in the cloud, ejectable black boxes, more.
Well, let's talk about the satellite. I was referring to the satellites a second ago. Chris, how about communicating with satellites? Why don't all airliners stream their black box data to satellites in real time?
Well, of course, it's entirely possible that airlines could do that, but the big problem is that there's a cost associated with it. It's not a cost that the airline community itself would like to bear. So there's a big debate going on about the cost implication of issuing forthwith recommendations to do with
is it possible to say whose responsibility it is to actually bear this cost?
It's the airlines that are responsible for bearing the cost of the data transfer, the transmission of that piece of information from an aircraft down to the ground. It will be them that will bear the cost, and there is the debate as to whether it should be them that bears the cost or otherwise.
Jerry, what do you make of that? It seems that the technology is available, but now it's just an issue of cost. When is there going to be a look at this balance between cost and safety?
Well, if we're going to put the black boxes in the cloud, let's think about this way. How many variables are we going to transmit? We have the modern black boxes now can record thousands of variables. Which ones are we going to send? Because the cost is real. We are talking about, if you look at the Inmarsat system now, they are running at about $5 a megabyte. You know, if you're going to continually stream the data, who's going to pay for it? How much is it going to cost? How much is it going to cost additional to the passengers? Because that's where it matters. Now, if we look at cases where planes have gone missing and never been found, look, this is very rare. The last time an airplane with over 100 people on board and got lost and it was never found was 1962. If we put 52 years in today's terms of flight numbers, we're talking about 1 in 9 billion flights. So I think the industry has to address the balance. What do we need? What we need is the faster method to find the aircraft. Wherever it goes down, we need to find it. Because that way, you can do all these fancy things at very much lower cost than if you're trying to do the streaming of the black boxes and everything. And you know, if you want to stream the black boxes, they go to the satellite. The antenna has to point to the satellite. What happens when your airplane goes inverted? Nobody who's proposed that has been able to answer that. What happens if the plane goes inverted, and then you lose the data link, and then it'll take a few more seconds for the, you know, once the airplane can see the, sorry, once the antenna can see the satellite, it will take a few more seconds to lock on and re-establish the link, and then if the plane continues to roll, then we just go on and on. So the way I see it, look, let's just focus on being able to track the aircraft and find it as soon as possible, wherever it is and whatever would happen.
Is that a discussion, Oliver, that the industry is prepared to have in depth and take action on rather than just make recommendations?
Absolutely. What we're looking in Southeast Asia is a crisis in flight management. We've lost 758 lives in 1 year. That's the most in 6.5 decades. So clearly, when you have millions of people traveling in Southeast Asia, which flying is the only mode of transportation across basically islands across large deep waters, these airlines who have to engage that region, Safer Skies over Asia, are all discussing global flight tracking, black box streaming, ejectable black boxes, because if we do not know what's going on in that black box and we can't get that data, we have no information and no knowledge of that aircraft. And for the families who are grieving on this, when we have one aircraft lost with 200 people on it, and then another, and then another, and then another, then we have a responsibility as an industry to ensure that these families are reunited with their loved ones, or at least know what the cause of their lost loved ones. I know we have millions and millions of flights to take off every day across our oceanic regions, but the trauma is that when we have one loss in safety, and we lose so many lives as we've lost this year, that's a crisis that the industry wants to take care of.
But how much evidence, Oliver,
discussing that.
Right, let me just ask you, how much evidence is there that sort of any new technology that will be implemented, that will be used to track planes, will actually prevent the disappearance of other aircrafts and the mystery of MH370?
The key to aircraft crashes investigations is having information very early on. The National Transportation Safety Board and the FAA of the United States is simply one of the best investigative air crash management systems in the world. And what the key to NTSB and FAA in the United States is getting good information fast. And they're looking at these streaming technologies. If Beyonce can basically push her music across the world through the cloud in a matter of seconds and sell her latest album, we can find out as engineers and scientists how to stream certain limited data so we can at least know where is and what was on MH370's black box. Because we've got to learn from crash accidents to be able to provide the safety for the future.
Chris, what would you want to see? The International Air Transport Association, IATA, has formed the Aircraft Tracking Task Force, and that is to identify sort of near-term options to improve the global tracking of aircraft. But what is it exactly that you'd want to see come out of that?
I would like to see come out of it the next step in the move to improve tracking and so forth on aircraft, and that is the ability for an aircraft to send its position every minute during the course of a flight. And by doing that, we have a much better chance to localize the search area in the case that an aircraft goes down, because believe you me, the difference between 1 minute interval tracking and 15-minute interval tracking is a huge number in terms of the distance that one would have to cover to find any evidence of wreckage.
Jerry, what would you like to see, and do you see a shift taking place in that direction?
My viewpoint is somewhere along the same lines as what Chris has said. The technology is there to send every 2 minutes in a cost-effective manner. The technology is there to send data which shows if there's something wrong with the aircraft. We don't need to send the whole black box. We can send data if the aeroplane has exceeded certain parameters, like if it's rolled over a certain degree, or pitched up or pitched down, or climb or descended exceeding certain rates. We have all this technology in place today, and it has been put in aircraft, but it is on a voluntary basis. Now, what I like to see is that we look at what can we do in the short run and what can cost-effectively prevent an aircraft going missing forever. If an airplane goes down, it goes down. There's nothing we can do about it. The most crucial thing is we got to find it. And the best way to find it is a much shorter interval of the position transmission.
On that note, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for my guests for joining me in Jakarta, Jerry Sojatman, in Manchester, Chris Yates, and over in Washington, D.C., Oliver McGee. Thank you very much. And thanks to our viewers for watching. You can always add your voice to the discussion. You can go to our program page at aljazeera.com. You can post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also tweet us at AJ Inside Story. I'm Darine Abugaida from the whole team. Bye-bye for now.